Alright, so question 20 is setting us up for the last few questions, 21 and 22. And the only time you would skip those questions is if in your book had no human characters or no animals acting as humans would or given human traits. So let's assume that our books, most of them will have humans depicted in the illustrations, or if it's, for example, a folk tale or a traditional story with animal characters, animals acting as humans would. So question 21 is going to ask about equal frequency of representation based on gender, racial, ethnic, or religious grouping, and disability. So gender is probably the easiest one because as you look through the book you're going to look only at the illustrations for these and decide whether mostly females are illustrated or portrayed, mostly males. There's an overall balance, which as we know from the world population should be roughly half and half. Or if, for example, in the case of animals, if it's just not apparent at all which gender the animal is supposed to be, that's probably going to be pretty rare. Certainly with humans it's going to be immediately obvious, but possibly with animals it might not be apparent, then you could choose that. So as you just go through the illustrations here, for example, is a book, a textbook from Nigeria, just running through the illustrations. You want to see are both men and women portrayed, and in roughly equal numbers. As we see in these first few chapters, it's a lot of women. So we might be tempted to say it's primarily women. Then we finally see some guys showing up and a few more guys. And now we've got mixed groups. But we are going to see certainly both of the sexes represented in fairly equal numbers. If you're feeling unsure, you can go through and count them all, but if you're feeling that roughly you're getting a lot of both of the sexes, then you don't have to absolutely go through and count each one. All right. The next category is racial, ethnic, and religious groups. This one's going to be a little bit harder because, first of all, it may not be obvious from the illustrations which racial, ethnic group or religious group is being depicted, but then again, sometimes it is obvious based primarily on their clothing or their style of dress. You immediately know that it's one or the other, and certainly if they're involved in religious activities, in this example, these are obviously Christians and this is obviously depicting a Muslim. Of course, most of the time it won't be that easy to tell if those different groups are represented or not. Certainly in some cases we would say no racial or ethnic or religious group identity is apparent in the illustrations. If they're animal characters, it's unlikely that they will be portrayed with a religious identity, and certainly not with a racial or ethnic identity because they are bunny rabbits or turtles or owls or whatever character. So this is possibly going to be a likely answer. If you have a mixed society where you have lots of Christians and Muslims in that society, but the book is only talking about or portraying one or the other, then this would be your obvious answer. If you have a society where maybe the entire society is made up of, over 90% just one religion, in which case of that target audience, in which case they're not really excluding part of the population because there are no other religions in that population, then you would choose this option. Or if you have a mixed society and both of those prominent religions are portrayed at one point or another in roughly proportional numbers to what is reflected in the local population, then you would also choose this option. So this is a little bit harder than just gender alone, but you can do the best you can to make the appropriate choice.